The emergency alarms blared through Capital Station Nexus 7, their piercing wail interrupting what should have been another mundane council session. I, Ambassador Krell Brightscale of the Centauri Collective, watched in growing dismay as my fellow council members rushed into the grand chamber, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching with barely contained panic. Order. Order in the chamber. High Chancellor Varix pounded their ceremonial staff against the crystalline floor, but even the thunderous echo couldn't quiet the chaos erupting around us. The usually composed Arcturian delegation was releasing stress pheromones so potent that the environmental filters were struggling to keep up. They just left. Ambassador Nix of the Silicon Concordat kept repeating, their photoreceptors rapidly cycling through various wavelengths of disbelief. The humans simply stood up and left. I adjusted my position in my hover seat, feeling the weight of every eye, optical sensor, and sensory tendril in the room turned toward me. As head of the diplomatic commission assigned to the human negotiations, this disaster fell squarely on my shoulders. Regent Ambassador Blackwood's exact words were, and I quote, "Thanks for wasting our time. We'll be in touch." My primary voice sac deflated with embarrassment as I continued, then she smiled. Not the usual human expression of friendship, but something different. Something that made my ancestral survival instincts scream in warning. The chamber erupted again. The Methane Collective's representatives began their anxious hover dance, creating small whirlwinds that scattered important documents across the chamber. The hive mind of Constantine IX buzzed so loudly it overwhelmed the universal translators. Silence. High Chancellor Varix's voice finally cut through the pandemonium. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed with authority. Ambassador Brightscale, explain how we reached this point. The negotiations were proceeding according to all standard protocols. I felt my scales flatten against my body, a sure sign of stress that I couldn't hide from my fellow council members. Chancellor, with all due respect, that was precisely the problem. We treated this like any other first contact scenario. We followed the same playbook we've used for the last 1,000 cycles. But the humans, I paused, searching for the right words, they saw right through it. Impossible. The quantum consciousness of Rigel's avatar flickered indignantly. Our protocols are perfect, refined through countless successful integrations. And that's exactly what they told us was wrong with them. I projected the final recording from the negotiation chamber. Alexandra Blackwood's hologram materialized in the center of the room, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp as plasma cutters. You claim to want peace. Her recorded voice rang clear and confident. But your version of peace is just thinly veiled subjugation dressed up in diplomatic niceties. We've read your history. Every species that signs your standard treaties ends up as a client race within 50 years. Did you really think we wouldn't notice the pattern? The recording faded, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. I watched realization dawn across 100 alien faces. We had severely underestimated these humans. There's more, I added, my secondary voice sac trembling slightly. Our long-range sensors detected unusual activity in their colony systems before we lost contact. They're moving something big. High Chancellor Varix's bioluminescence dimmed noticeably. How long until they respond to our hails? That's just it, Chancellor. They're not ignoring our communications. I brought up another hologram, showing the status of our quantum entanglement network. They've somehow completely nullified our fastest communication methods. We're limited to light speed signals now. By the time we can coordinate a response across our territory. I didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew what it meant. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council wasn't the one controlling the pace of negotiations. The humans had turned our own bureaucracy against us, and they'd done it with a smile. Looking back, we should have recognized the warning signs from our very first encounter. The mining fleet of the Proxima Corporation had been conducting standard resource surveys in the disputed zones between the Centauri Collective and the Silicon Concordat when they detected unusual energy signatures. Unregistered vessels in restricted space fleet. Commander Zena Starweaver had announced, following standard first contact protocols. This is a council-regulated mining operation. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose. The response came not in the expected format of universal mathematical sequences, but in perfectly translated galactic standard. This is Captain Nathan Spencer of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon. We're conducting our own survey of these systems. Wasn't aware this area was claimed by anyone. I remember watching the recordings later, noting how Starweaver's tendrils curled in amusement at their primitive-looking ships. The humans' vessels appeared to be held together with patches and improvised repairs, their hulls marked with what we later learned were called graffiti art. A concept that still baffles our xenoanthropologists. Unknown vessels, your presence here violates Council space regulations, Starweaver continued, deploying her containment fleet in standard formation. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection. That's when things got interesting. The human ships didn't power down. Instead, they began moving in patterns that our tactical computers dismissed as random and chaotic. With all due respect. Captain Spencer's voice carried an odd tone we would later learn was sarcasm. We'd rather not. See, we've got a schedule to keep, and bureaucracy really isn't our thing. Starweaver, following protocol to the letter, activated her ship's immobilization fields, a technology that had subdued countless species before. The energy net stretched out toward the human vessels and passed right through them. Hologram Starweaver's confusion lasted only moments before her sensors screamed warnings. The real human ships had somehow slipped behind her fleet, appearing from what her instruments insisted was empty space. Sorry about the deception, Spencer's voice now carried genuine amusement, but we needed to test your intentions. Shooting first isn't very neighborly, you know. The mining fleet's automated defense systems registered the sudden appearance of unknown vessels in attack position and responded according to their programming. Energy beams lashed out at the human ships. What happened next still haunts our military strategists. The humans didn't dodge. They didn't raise shields. The beams simply bent around their hulls, like light around a black hole. Well, Spencer sighed. We tried to be nice about this. In the next 30 seconds, every system on Starweaver's ships older than 10 cycles simply stopped working. Not damaged, not destroyed, they just powered down, as if they'd grown tired and decided to take a nap. The few newer systems continued functioning, but spoke in what our engineers would later describe as baby talk. Did you just infect our ships with a computer virus that gave our systems a midlife crisis? Starweaver asked, her professional demeanor cracking for the first time in her career. More of a digital age regression, really, Spencer replied cheerfully. Don't worry, it's temporary. But maybe next time ask before shooting. The Council, of course, responded to this incident with its usual measured wisdom, which is to say, absolute panic masked by bureaucratic overconfidence. Emergency sessions were called. Committees were formed to oversee the formation of other committees. The quantum consciousness of Rigel insisted we quarantine the entire sector. I remember High Chancellor Varick's dismissing concerns during that first meeting. They're clearly an emerging species that stumbled upon some advanced technology they don't fully understand. Our standard diplomatic package will bring them into the fold easily enough. The Council voted unanimously to proceed with standard first contact protocols. Only Ambassador Nix abstained, their photoreceptors dimmed thoughtfully as they processed the incident reports. They turned our mining fleet's battleships into technological toddlers, Nix observed quietly. And you think they don't understand their technology? Perhaps we're the ones not understanding something. But the Council had made its decision. We would proceed according to the same protocols that had worked for thousands of cycles. After all, what could one species possibly do to upset the established order of an entire galaxy? As I compile this report now, watching the Council chamber dissolve into panic, I can't help but appreciate the human concept of irony. We had dismissed their ships as primitive because they looked unconventional. We had assumed their technology was borrowed because it didn't match our understanding of development patterns. We had treated them as just another species to be guided into our carefully managed galactic community. And in doing so, we had completely failed to notice that they weren't following anyone's patterns but their own. The Council, in its infinite wisdom, decided I should lead the diplomatic mission to the humans. Their reasoning? I was the only ambassador who had ever lost a game of chance, making me uniquely qualified to understand unpredictable species. I'm still not sure if that was meant to be a compliment. Our first meeting with Region Ambassador Alexandra Blackwood took place on Neutral Station 7, a pristine facility designed to impress new species with the Council's power and sophistication. She showed up in what her species calls a vintage leather jacket and ripped jeans, which sent our cultural analysts into a frenzy trying to decode the symbolic meaning. "Nice place you've got here," she said, running a finger along one of our quantum-aligned perfect surfaces and somehow leaving a smudge that defied our self-cleaning protocols. "Very sterile." "We pride ourselves on maintaining optimal conditions for all known forms of life," I responded, watching in horror as she pulled out something called a bubble gum and started chewing it. "All known forms of life," she raised an eyebrow. "Funny how that works, isn't it? You know what exists, so you optimize for it. But what about all the things you don't know about yet?" Our preliminary meetings quickly established a pattern. We would present carefully crafted proposals backed by thousands of years of diplomatic precedent. Alexandra would find ways to derail them with questions that seemed absurd yet somehow struck at the heart of our assumptions. "So let me get this straight," she said during our resource rights discussion. "You want us to register all our mining operations with your central authority?" Indeed, Ambassador Nix's avatar pulsed with approval. "This ensures fair distribution and prevents conflicts over." "Aha," Alexandra interrupted, blowing a bubble with that infernal gum. "And who decides what's fair?" "The Council has developed complex algorithms over millennia too." Right. The same Council that's been gradually absorbing independent species into its sphere of influence for how long now?" My scales itched as she pulled out a datapad. "Interesting reading, your history. Every species that's joined your council in the last 1,000 years has gradually lost control of their resource rights. It's subtle, just a regulation here, a treaty addendum there. But the pattern's pretty clear if you know what to look for." "That's an outrageous interpretation," Ambassador Vix of the Methane Collective spun in agitation. "We bring order and prosperity." "Sure you do," Alexandra smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just like the old Earth empires brought civilization to the natives. We've seen this movie before, folks. Didn't like how it ended the first time." The tension grew with each meeting. We offered them membership in our trading networks. They asked why all trade had to flow through council-approved channels. We proposed sharing our technological database. They asked why certain sections were restricted to full members only. We suggested integrating their defense forces into our fleet structure. They laughed so hard the station's gravity briefly malfunctioned. Things came to a head during the resource rights negotiations for the Epsilon sector. Our surveys had shown rich deposits of quantum-stable elements, crucial for advanced AI development. By council law, such strategic resources required careful oversight. "These deposits are vital to the stability of the galaxy," I explained, presenting our standard regulatory framework. "We simply want to ensure they're managed responsibly." Alexandra leaned back in her chair, another human habit that somehow made our ergonomically perfect furniture look uncomfortable. "Managed responsibly by giving the Council primary oversight and first refusal rights on all extracted materials. It's a standard arrangement that has served." "Tell me," Ambassador Brightscale, she interrupted, fixing me with that unnerving human stare, "do you actually believe what you're saying? Because either you're trying to deceive us, which would be bad, or you've genuinely convinced yourself this is fair, which might be worse." "I don't understand," I admitted, my scales shifting in discomfort. "That's exactly the problem." She stood up, pacing the room with an energy that made our security systems nervous. "You've all been playing this game so long you've forgotten it is a game. These pretty words, oversight, regulation, integration, they're just fancy ways of saying control. The Council ensures peace and stability through monopoly and dependence." Her voice rang through the chamber. "Every species that joins you gives up a little bit of independence for security, a little bit of freedom for prosperity. And before they know it, they're so tangled in your regulations and treaties that they couldn't break free if they wanted to." The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of environmental systems. Alexandra walked to the window, staring out at the stars. "You know what the truly funny thing is? You probably don't even see it as conquest anymore. You've wrapped it in so many layers of bureaucracy and protocol that you believe your own propaganda." I felt a chill in my primary nervous system. "What exactly are you suggesting, Regent Ambassador?" She turned back to us, and for the first time I saw something beyond the casual confidence she usually projected. Something harder. I'm suggesting that humanity isn't interested in being another thread in your carefully woven web. We're not here to be managed, regulated, or overseen. We're here to be partners, equal partners, or we're not here at all. The implications hung in the air like a gravitational anomaly, distorting everything around it. We had encountered resistance before, of course, but never from a species that seemed to see through our diplomatic facades so clearly. Never from one that could match our technology while rejecting our philosophy. As I watched Alexandra Blackwood stare down a room full of the galaxy's most powerful beings, I realized we weren't just failing to negotiate with the humans. We were failing to comprehend them, and in diplomacy that's the most dangerous failure of all. The final negotiation session was scheduled for what humans call a Thursday. I mention this because Alexandra Blackwood had once told me that interesting things always seem to happen on Thursdays. At the time, I dismissed it as another peculiar human superstition. Now, I'm not so sure. The Council had prepared what they considered an overwhelming show of force. Every member species sent representatives. The Chamber's holographic displays showed real-time feeds from across Council space mining operations, trade routes, military installations. The message was clear: this is what you're choosing to be part of. This is what you risk losing. Alexandra walked in 15 minutes late, carrying something called a coffee cup. The Council's sensors immediately began analyzing its contents, probably expecting some kind of weapon. They just found an alarming amount of caffeine. "Sorry for the delay," she said. Not sounding sorry at all. Had to make a few calls. High Chancellor Varix rose to their full height, bioluminescent patterns gleaming with authority. Regent Ambassador Blackwood, the Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's position in galactic affairs. Oh, she took a sip of coffee. Do tell. Your species has demonstrated both technological capability and cultural uniqueness. However, your continued resistance to standard integration protocols threatens the stability we have maintained for millennia. The Chamber's displays shifted, showing the borders of Council space. Our territory looked vast, orderly, and overwhelming. Humanity's claimed systems appeared as a tiny cluster of dots in comparison. Therefore, Varix continued, we present you with a choice. Accept our final offer of membership, with all standard protocols and regulations applied over a generous 10-year transition period, or face economic isolation. The threat hung in the air. No species had ever chosen isolation over Council membership. The costs were too high, the benefits of membership too great to ignore. Alexandra set down her coffee cup. You know, she said conversationally, we have this old Earth story about a guy who tried to catch the sun in a net. Want to know how that worked out for him? This is not the time for human parables. Ambassador Nix's avatar flickered with impatience. No, she stood up, and something in her posture made our security systems shift to high alert. Then let me be direct. Computer, execute protocol. Looking glass. The Chamber's displays flickered. For a moment, we thought she was trying to hack our systems, a futile gesture given our security. Then we realized she wasn't changing our displays. She was adding to them. New dots appeared on the map. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Human ships and stations we'd never detected, hidden in what we'd thought was empty space. Mining operations in regions we'd thought unexplored. Trade routes that bypassed our carefully controlled networks entirely. Fun fact about humanity, Alexandra said, walking slowly around the chamber. We're really good at seeing patterns. Like how your ships always follow the same patrol routes, how your sensors all scan on the same frequencies, how your maps all show the same safe zones and danger areas. She gestured at the new displays. We're also really good at finding the gaps in those patterns. The blind spots. The assumptions so deep you don't even know you're making them. The chamber erupted in chaos. The Methane Collective's representatives began emitting distress gases. The hive mind of Constantine IX split into its component consciences, each buzzing with different theories and fears. Impossible, the quantum consciousness of Rigel's avatar was rapidly shifting through color patterns, indicating disbelief and rage. Our detection systems are perfect. No, Alexandra corrected, they're predictable. You've been the biggest kid in the galaxy so long, you forgot what it's like to be small. To have to be clever. to look for the spaces between the spaces. She walked back to her seat and picked up her coffee cup. Here's the thing about your choice, Chancellor. We don't need your trade routes. We built our own. We don't need your technology sharing programs. We developed what we needed. And we definitely don't need your protection. The displays shifted again, showing what looked like empty sectors of space. Then something moved. The sensors registered nothing, but our eyes, all dozen varieties of them in the room, saw massive shapes shifting in the void. Human ships, using technology we couldn't even detect, let alone understand. But most importantly, Alexandra's voice cut through the pandemonium. We don't need your approval. Humanity didn't come here looking for a parent to guide us or a master to serve. We came looking for equals to trade with, neighbors to live beside, and maybe even friends to learn from. She stood again, and this time even High Chancellor Varix seemed to shrink back slightly. Instead, we found an empire so convinced of its own benevolence it doesn't recognize its chains. A system so afraid of change it would rather strangle innovation than adapt. Well, thanks, but no thanks. You can't just leave, someone in the chamber said. I think it was me. Alexandra smiled, not her usual diplomatic smile, but something older and sharper. Watch us. But here's a counteroffer for you to consider while we're gone. When you're ready to talk about real partnership, equal terms, mutual respect, no hidden agendas, send a message. We'll be around. She walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Chancellor, those patrol routes you're about to reorganize? The security protocols you're planning to update? Maybe consider why we let you see what we let you see today. The door hissed shut behind her. In the stunned silence that followed, our sensors detected multiple human ships decloaking just long enough to be seen, then vanishing again. Not a threat, just a reminder. They didn't bother using the designated departure lanes. Their ships simply left, crossing boundaries our scientists had deemed uncrossable, using principles our engineers insisted were impossible. As the council chamber descended into arguments and accusations, I found myself thinking about that human story, the one about catching the sun in a net. I finally understood the point. Some things cannot be contained, some forces cannot be controlled, and sometimes the very act of trying only proves how little you truly understand what you're dealing with. The humans had never needed our help to reach the stars. They'd already taken them. We just hadn't been paying attention to the right places. And now we had to live with the knowledge that they were out there, watching from the spaces between our carefully ordered patterns, waiting to see if we could learn from our mistakes. I looked at my datapad, where a final message from Alexandra Blackwood blinked, "Thanks for the coffee. Keep the cup." The next 48 hours in council space were pure pandemonium. I've seen solar systems collapse into black holes that caused less chaos than the humans' departure. The council chambers, normally a model of decorum and order, had devolved into something resembling a zero-gravity food fight without the food. How long, High Chancellor Varix demanded, their bioluminescent patterns strobing in distress? How long have they been operating in our blind spots? The intelligence director, a multinodal entity named Pulse, projected their findings into the chamber's center, based on energy trace analysis and backdated sensor logs approximately 7 years before first official contact. 7 years, the Silicon Concordat's representative cracked 3 of their crystal facets in shock. They were studying us before we even knew they existed. Studying, mapping, and Pulse's nodes rippled uncomfortably, experimenting. We've discovered test sites where they deliberately triggered our automated response systems, recorded our reactions, then vanished before we could investigate. The chamber's displays showed incident after incident, mysterious sensor ghosts, unexplained equipment malfunctions, patrol routes reporting split-second anomalies, all dismissed as routine glitches at the time. All now revealing a pattern of methodical observation. They turned our entire defense network into their private research project, Ambassador Nix observed, their photoreceptors dimmed to a horrified purple. And we didn't even notice. That's not the worst part, I added, pulling up Alexandra's parting gift, a data crystal she'd left in that infamous coffee cup. They want us to know how they did it. The crystal contained what humans call a highlight reel, a greatest hits compilation of their infiltration techniques. It showed their ships slipping through our sensor nets by matching the background radiation so perfectly our systems read them as empty space. It revealed how they'd mapped our quantum communication networks by tracking the subtle gravitational distortions our secure messages created. They hid in plain sight. Pulse's nodes pulsed with reluctant admiration. Their ships look patched together because each patch is a custom-designed sensor deflector. The graffiti on their hulls encoded data about our patrol patterns. Even their apparent technological mistakes were calculated to make us underestimate them. A junior analyst burst into the chamber, their locomotion tentacles tangled in excitement. "Chancellor, we've detected unusual activity in the Gamma sector." The displays shifted to show a human mining operation suddenly appearing where nothing had registered before. As we watched, more installations revealed themselves across supposedly empty space. Not decloaking, they'd simply stopped actively hiding. "They're showing us their network," Pulse realized, piece by piece. "But why?" "Because they're not trying to threaten us," I said, remembering Alexandra's words. "They're proving a point. Every revelation is in a sector we claimed we couldn't protect them in. Every installation is producing resources we said they'd need our help to obtain." The council members watched as more human operations became visible. Trade routes that paralleled our own. Research stations in regions we deemed too dangerous for development. Even what appeared to be peaceful contact with species we hadn't yet discovered, hidden in the gaps between our carefully mapped territories. How the hive mind of Constantine IX buzzed in collective confusion. How did they build all this without triggering any of our monitoring systems? "They used our own efficiency against us," Pulse explained, nodes cycling through data streams. "Our systems are optimized to detect known patterns. Anything that doesn't match those patterns gets filtered out as background noise. The humans simply." They paused, searching for the right words, danced between the raindrops. "And now," High Chancellor Varix asked, their glow dimmed to barely a flicker. "Now they're everywhere and nowhere," I said. "Our latest analyses suggest what we're seeing is just what they want us to see. For every installation they've revealed, our predictive models suggest 3 to 5 more still hidden." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just rejected our offer, they demonstrated its irrelevance. We tried to pressure them with economic isolation, only to discover they'd built their own economy in our blind spots. We'd threatened them with technological sanctions, only to learn they'd already surpassed us in ways we were just beginning to understand. "There's a message embedded in the data," Crystal Pulse announced. "Text only. It reads, 'The best place to hide is in assumptions. Thanks for lending us yours.'" A junior council member, their scales still bright with youth, raised an appendage. "But what do they want?" I looked at the displays, at the elegant dance of revealed and hidden human activities across our space. Exactly what they said they wanted. Equal partnership. They've proved they don't need our help. Now they're waiting to see if we can handle being equals instead of rulers. "And if we can't?" the Silicon Concordat's representative asked. The answer came from an unexpected source, the coffee cup Alexandra had left behind. It suddenly projected a hologram of her face, grinning that unsettling human grin. "Then we'll keep playing hide and seek," her recorded message said. "We're getting pretty good at it. Oh, and Chancellor, your security override codes really should be changed more than once a century. Just friendly advice from your new neighbors." The hologram winked out, leaving us to contemplate a galaxy that had suddenly become much larger and much stranger than we'd ever imagined. The humans hadn't just walked away from our peace talks. They'd rewritten the rules of the game. 3 days after the humans' dramatic exit, I was summoned to a closed session of the Council's inner circle. The chamber felt smaller with just 7 representatives present, though no less tense. High Chancellor Varix's bioluminescence had dimmed to an almost sickly glow. "Show them," Varix commanded. Intelligence Director Pulse projected a new set of data streams. At first, they looked like standard space-time mapping plots until I noticed the timestamps. "These readings are from 2 years before first contact," Pulse explained, nodes trembling. "From a sensor array we thought was completely isolated from any network." The data showed gravitational distortions consistent with large-scale fleet movements, not in remote sectors or hidden corners of space, but right through the heart of Council territory, through sectors we monitored constantly. through spaces we thought we controlled absolutely. "That's impossible," I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew. We'd been playing chess while the humans had rewritten the rules of geometry. "It gets worse," Pulse continued. "Their nodes shifted to a deep indigo, the closest their species could come to embarrassment. We found their observation posts. They're powered by our own energy grid." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. High Chancellor Varix's patterns flashed warning colors. "Explain." "They didn't hack our systems or steal our power," Pulse clarified. "They found the mathematical gaps in our power distribution network spaces where our equations said energy loss was inevitable. Except it wasn't being lost. They'd found a way to harvest energy from what we considered unavoidable system inefficiency. They've been living in our dropped decimal points." Ambassador Nix's avatar flickered with what might have been admiration. "Using power we didn't even know we were losing." "That's not all they've been living in," a new voice announced. The quantum consciousness of Rigel's avatar appeared, its usual confident glow now uncertain. "We found their primary observation network. It's been running parallel to our quantum communication system this entire time." How Varix demanded. "The quantum network is based on fundamental universal constants." "No," the consciousness corrected. "It's based on what we thought were universal constants. The humans found the spaces between our quantum states gaps we thought were mathematically impossible. They've been sending signals through the shadows of our own communications." I felt my scales flatten against my body as understanding dawned. The mining fleet incident. The peace talks. Even their dramatic exit, none of it was random, was it? "They orchestrated everything," Pulse confirmed. "Every reaction, every response, every assumption we made, they knew exactly how we'd behave because they've been studying us from inside our own systems for years." The chamber's displays shifted again, showing a new analysis of human activity. Not just their revealed operations, but theoretical models of their true reach. The Council's territory didn't contain human activity contained the Council's territory. "They're not hiding in our blind spots," I realized aloud. "We're operating in gaps they left for us." High Chancellor Varix's glow dimmed to almost nothing. "Why reveal this now? Why show us anything at all?" A message appeared on all our screens simultaneously, bypassing every security protocol we had. The sender ID read simply A. Blackwood. "Because good neighbors should know each other," the message read. "And it's time you knew who you were really dealing with. P.S. Check your quantum variance logs for the past decade. You'll find we've been quietly preventing 3 separate cascade failures in your network. You're welcome." The silence that followed was profound enough to register on gravity sensors. "They could have let our system collapse," Ambassador Nix said quietly. "Could have taken control at any time. Instead, they maintained our illusion of control while quietly ensuring we couldn't accidentally destroy ourselves," I finished. "They weren't acting like an emerging species seeking recognition. They were acting like advanced observers maintaining a protected civilization," Pulse concluded. U.S. The implications hit us all at once. Every patronizing assumption we'd made, every diplomatic protocol we'd tried to impose, every threat we'd thought would work, we'd been like children playing at politics while the adults watched patiently, stepping in only when we risked real harm. "Well," High Chancellor Varix said after a long moment, their patterns showing a completely new color combination I can only assume meant hysterical amusement. "At least now we know why they found our standard integration protocols so funny. The humans hadn't needed to walk away from our peace talks. They'd never needed them in the first place. They'd simply grown tired of pretending they did. The humans let us stew in our revelation for exactly 1 standard week before Alexandra Blackwood walked back into the council chamber. No dramatic entrance this time. No coffee cup. She simply appeared in her chair as if she'd been there all along, which was somehow more unnerving than any grand gesture could have been. So she said, looking around at our thoroughly humbled assembly, ready to talk about actual partnership. High Chancellor Varix, showing remarkable adaptability for someone whose species evolved from living crystals, simply nodded. "We are prepared to hear your terms." "Terms," Alexandra smiled. "Interesting word choice. Let's start with something simpler. How about truth?" She gestured. And the chamber's displays came to life, but not with military positions or resource maps. Instead, we saw images of human children in schools, learning about alien cultures. Markets where humans and newly contacted species traded goods and stories. Research stations where human scientists worked alongside beings they'd discovered in the spaces between council territories. While you were trying to figure out how to control us, we were building something else. A network of genuine cooperation. Real cultural exchange. Actual diplomacy. She leaned forward. Want to be part of it. Why, I found myself asking. Why offer us anything after how we treated you? Because that's what neighbors do, she replied. Look, we get it. You've been the most advanced civilization in known space for so long you forgot how to look up. But the galaxy's bigger than your maps, bigger than your protocols, and it's got room enough for all of us to grow. The council chamber, for the first time in recorded history, was completely silent. No private communications, no subspace chatter, just the sound of an entire civilization realizing it needed to evolve. Besides, Alexandra added with that familiar hint of mischief, someone needs to teach you how to have fun. Your parties are terrible. All those regulations about proper celebration protocols. That's just sad. And just like that, the tension broke. The methane collective actually laughed a sound like wind through quantum tunnels. The hive mind of Constantine IX started humming what they claimed was a human tune they'd learned from a trading post in supposedly empty space. High Chancellor Varix's patterns shifted to show curiosity, pure, simple curiosity, without the weight of authority they usually carried. What would this partnership look like? Like this, Alexandra said, and showed us a vision of the galaxy we'd never imagined. Not ordered, but organic. Not controlled, but connected. A space where different species could develop at their own pace, trade their own way, grow in their own directions. Looking back now, as I record this account for the Council archives, I understand what we'd missed about humans all along. We saw their adaptability and assumed it meant they could be shaped to our needs. We saw their resourcefulness and thought it meant they needed our guidance. We never considered that these traits meant something else entirely, that humans had not just survived, but thrived precisely because they rejected the idea of any single right way to exist. The Council still exists, but it's different now. We're learning to be facilitators instead of rulers, coordinators instead of controllers. The humans taught us that true power isn't about making everyone follow your path, it's about helping them find their own. And yes, they're still out there in the spaces between our sensors, in the gaps in our equations, in the shadows of our quantum networks, but now they wave as they pass by. Sometimes they even stop for coffee. Just don't ask them to fill out the proper forms for it. Some things never change. End report. Ambassador Krell Brightscale, former Council Diplomatic Corps, current co-chair, Galactic Cultural Exchange Initiative. P.S. Alexandra, I know you'll read this before it's officially filed. The coffee cup still works as a hologram projector. Very funny.